Welcome, Michele. Thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are thrilled to have you here. And I'm super excited because we met at the Latitude conference a couple of months ago. And I think, a 5-minute conversation turned into a 2-hour conversation. And we were like, we could just keep talking more and more. And we thought, Michele is somebody we have to get on the podcast because your story is phenomenal. Your energy is amazing. And the things that you are doing to disrupt just the work environment and helping organizations is phenomenal. So I wanted to have, an opportunity for people in our audience to get to know you and hear a little bit about Michele, your story and what you've learned along your journey, because you've had an amazing, successful journey in multiple industries doing different things. And it's just great to share those types of learnings with others. So without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, Monica, first of all, thank you very much. Yes, we had an amazing connection and
Yes.
that led into another connection that very same day. And you're right. And thank you so much in terms of having me here as a guest on your Beyond Barriers podcast. Boy, do I love that name.
Yes.
Because it is all about, eliminating barriers, reducing barriers so that we can all show up and contribute in a meaningful way and really achieve our objectives, right? And,
yes, absolutely.
I love that. So yes, as you know from our conversation, my professional life started in broadcasting. When I graduated college, that was my first profession. And so I was a news anchor and a reporter for several entities. And I did that for close to 18 years. And then I transitioned to becoming an entrepreneur. And now, I'm 3 companies into it. Mm-hmm. And my latest company is a tech company. And if someone would have said to me, 5 years ago, do you envision yourself as being a Latina in tech? And I'd say, what planet did you fall off of?
Yes.
But here I am. And, obviously we can talk a little bit more about that. But I think the thread in all of that is not limiting yourself, mm-hmm. not limiting your goals, not limiting your vision, not limiting your belief system, and happy to chat more with you regarding these topics that are relevant to your career women.
Yes. Absolutely. And thanks for that. And I mean, I think you're being modest because you were an award-winning, news anchor, many awards and many nominations. But that said, you have this, we all have this instilled work ethic to kind of do our best. And, but I want to talk a little bit about your career. As you said, 5 years ago, you would have never thought of being a Latina in tech and leading an organization that is successful and having 3, you're a serial entrepreneur with successful companies. How did you do that? How did you get the clarity? What was that moment that you were like, I'm going to do this? And how did you get the courage to say, okay, I've never done this before, but I'm going to move forward despite the uncertainty? Talk a little bit about that. Like, where did you get the clarity? And how are you kind of making yourself be successful in areas that are maybe uncharted for yourself?
Yeah. So the clarity piece, what's interesting to me is that I think one of my strengths is I have good ideas. Not all ideas are good. Not all of my ideas are good, let me tell you that. However, I do have an ability to see where there are gaps and creatively come up with solutions, at least, in my mind. And so the piece about the entrepreneurship and like, why did I decide? Because I transitioned from broadcasting to become an entrepreneur, is because when I was a broadcaster, I actually saw a gap in the media space geared to Latinos. And so my mind started creatively, figuring out and visualizing a solution and, how you would do that. And that has translated into not only my companies, but also, other things that I have done in my life. And what I've come to realize, Monica, is that as an entrepreneur in particular, and by the way, I think this applies to professional women as well, meaning professionals in corporate America and other areas. You don't always have to know the answers, right? We
Yes.
often get bogged down in believing that we have to have all the answers, and there's a myriad of reasons why many of us can feel that way. And in my case, but back to this Latina and tech angle of my story, I am not an engineer. Okay, I can go over to where my engineers work, and I'll look at their screens, and it might as well be hieroglyphics as far as I'm concerned, because I
Right.
don't know Jack. I don't know if I can say what I would say based
Absolutely.
on what I'm seeing on the screen. So I'll ask them, okay, well, what does this do, and what does this mean? But I do know that the output that I'm seeing is delivering what I envision or what we need or whatever the case is. But I do know how to bring in the right people who do know, right?
Yes.
And that's really the key is you don't always have to have the answers, but recognize that if you can just identify the right people who do know and then build from there, that's a great thing. So for me, transitioning from broadcasting to becoming an entrepreneur, there were a number of reasons that made that of interest and appealing to me. One of them being, my broadcasting career for the most part was really about making an impact. It was less about the fame and fortune. Now, I'll be honest with you, the fame piece has helped. It's opened doors, even to this day, I can ask for a meeting and someone will take it simply based on, my professional background. They knew I was a broadcaster, those kinds of things. So it certainly helps. It does have some credibility to it. But for me, it wasn't so much about that. It was about using the medium to create changes, put crooks out of, business, into jail, and, creating laws that save lives and those kinds of things. And so when I had this idea for my first company, it was really taking that ability to make an impact to a different level. And, I think as an entrepreneur, you can certainly do that. Now, we can also do it in a professional basis as well, but that's really what drove me. So I was at a point in my life where I was reevaluating certain things that were important to me, and the broadcasting piece became less important, and the ability to really focus on making an impact became more important. I realized from the long term, I could have a greater impact, having companies. So there's that piece. Now, you asked about the courage piece. So that's a whole different angle. So the first is, we all have our personalities and our constitutional makeup. And I will say, generally speaking, I'm a calculated risk taker. And that's, on whatever personality scales there are that will tell you information about you as an individual. And so when I say a calculated risk taker, meaning I'm not afraid of taking risks. Now, I'm not foolish and just jump into anything or that kind of thing. But, there's some people who are very cautious, right? Very, very reserved in that way. I wouldn't say, yes, I do have a level of cautiousness, but I wouldn't say I'm much more on the other side of that, and there's, in business, there's a very interesting correlated parallel between founders. And, you have individuals who are optimists. That's me, right? I can do anything. I'll figure it out. I'll say yes, because I may not know all the answers today, but I'll figure it out, right? And to a large degree, that's a great trait to have, because it keeps things propelling forward, right? Now, but you need your realist or your pessimist, candidly.
Yes.
You need the pessimist who sit there and say, well, I don't know, because, this could happen, and then this could happen, and the world's going to collapse, and the sky's going to fall, and whatever. And in that mix, right, those pessimists, or those person who would perhaps say they're realists, right, are checking the optimist and making sure that the optimist isn't going so far, right, that they're not paying attention to certain things. So there's that fine balance that happens. And so back to courage and personality. So personality wise, I'm certainly a very optimistic person, generally speaking, and I am prone to taking calculated risk. And I'll hear people who I value their opinion and give me their risk perspective, right? And sometimes I'll really assess it, and sometimes I'll listen to it, and then I think I'm the exception. That's what can happen. Oh yeah, okay, that's what happened. So there's that piece. So I think courage stems a little bit from that, but the other piece is really around an unfortunate life experience that I had, which is I lost one of my children.
Mm.
And unfortunately, very
Sorry to
sadly,
hear that. Mhm.
thank you. And my middle son was born with a genetic defect, which there was no cure, and he died just before reaching 1 year old.
Mm.
And I bring that up because after that experience, and that was now just over 20 years ago, after that experience, and anyone, I hope not many people who are listening have had this experience, but if you have, you know this, which is, going through the grief of that kind of loss
Mhm.
is, and when I say going through the grief, doesn't mean you get over it, but you learn how to manage and you go through the grief journey. That psychologists would tell you that's the worst life experience that anyone can have. So
Yeah.
I equate it to I've been to hell and I'm back, right? I've been to hell
Mm.
and back.
Right.
So back to your courage question, I've been to hell and back. So
Right.
when I assess something I want to do, I'll go, so what's the worst case scenario? I fail, go, whatever, everything goes, under. If I were a professional, I'd get fired or I'd lose my job, whatever.
Mhm.
Like, and I don't, so in my
Yeah.
head, so I've already been to hell and back. It's not
Yes.
as
You'll
bad as
rise
I've
again.
been, right? And I've come back.
Mhm.
So I think that experience and in that regard has added value to how I see things, because that also creates a level of fearlessness. Good, because
Mhm.
I've been to hell and back. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can I can model the worst case scenario, and I know
Mhm.
I'll still be standing. Right.
Mm.
And I'll still,
Yes.
like, and so I won't be 6 feet under, hopefully.
Mhm. Right.
I still be standing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So in my case, that's added, I think, to that fearlessness, or as you called it, courage.
Yes. And it makes absolute sense because it's evidence based, right? You've been to hell and back. There's evidence that you will rise again. And so I think it's really important for people to reflect that maybe they haven't had as a, traumatic or difficult situation, but they have risen back or bounced back from, certain things, and they can do it again and again. And I think
Mhm.
that's powerful, of really tapping into that mindset of, I've been there, done that. I can take on all these new things. And I think it's powerful.
Yeah. And, I think, um, one of the things that I think that's also helpful, and we talked about this. One of my practices is what I call my holy hour.
Hmm.
And I tried to get it in every day. Not always successful, but part of that is meditation, visualization, other things. And whenever I'm faced with a situation that is nerve-wracking or highly stressful or anxiety provoking, and
Hmm.
we're human beings. Our brains tend to go to the worst
Yes.
case scenario, right?
Hmm.
Then I always remember that I've been through bad cases. I've been through worst case scenarios,
Yes.
and I'm standing, or this happened, or this happened. So it kind of helps me a little bit in terms of um, adds to the fearlessness, but also adds to like the reality perspective of how
Hmm.
you think about things. Like, is it really going to be catastrophic? And let's just say in this slim chance it's catastrophic, right?
Yes.
We can do this, but when I look at my statistical experience, and
Hmm.
I realize, oh, okay, I've been through situations like that before, and here I am, whatever, 2 years later, 6 years later, 20 years later, and so I go through that and I go, okay, I'm confident it's going to be okay.
Yes. And I think that's powerful. Like you said, questioning and doing the kind of stress test of like, how real is this? And if it is going to be catastrophic, then how will I bounce back, and start visualizing how you would pivot or how you would react. And so that way, in those moments, you aren't caught standing on the back of your heels. It's
Hmm.
kind of like, oh, I thought about this and here's what I'm going to do next. I think that is
Right.
so powerful.
Yeah, and I think some experts would call that, I think this is an element of cognitive behavioral therapy, which
Hmm.
I've had. I'm not, I have no problem sharing that I've had lots of
Hmm.
therapy over my life, but yeah, that's the cognitive piece.
Yes, absolutely.
Weighing the reality of what your brain, your stories you're telling yourself, right?
Yes. Absolutely. It's so powerful. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about, because you talked about the power of community, like you said, when you were facing, areas of uncertainty, going from broadcasting to now in the tech space. And, then realizing that, you didn't have to be the expert. You didn't have to know how to code and build anything, but really looking at your community, the composition of your community, and saying, okay, I need to get to know X people in this industry, or I need to find people who know how to find the engineers, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about the steps that you took in terms of building strategic and powerful relationships to help you build what you were envisioning? And how, we get this question all the time from women in our program, where they feel like when they hear the word strategic relationships, powerful relationships, that there's an ulterior motive and it's not authentic. How do you get around that? And how can you bust that myth for people in that, true relationships are true relationships, but you do have to be strategic. Can you talk about that?
Yes, and as women, generally speaking, of course, there are women who don't fit this profile, but generally speaking, women are very relationship oriented, right?
Yes.
And authenticity is a big piece of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of things. The first is there's a great book that I recommend about strategic relationship building, and it's written by a friend of mine named Keith Ferrazzi, and it's called Never. It's either never. So here, Keith Ferrazzi, that's the key piece. Keith Ferrazzi. Yes. And I believe the book is Never Eat Lunch Alone Again,
yes.
And pardon me, I wasn't, it just came to me. Otherwise,
no, that's fantastic. And I think you're right. I think it's like Never Eat Lunch Alone. Like
right.
Never,
There's an orange. It's an orange cover, and then there's a subsequent one, a blue color. The point being, so there's strategic, and then there's authenticity. So how do we mirror the two? And the authentic piece is around providing value, right? First of all, we know people like to deal with, engage with, have in their network, have in their community people that they like, right? And that's true across no matter what. And so some of us have likable characteristics, and it's easy, and we're outgoing, and it's it's easy. Some of us it's a little more challenging, right? Especially if we're an introvert, or we have social anxiety, or these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But regardless, the authenticity piece can often come from providing value. And so so if we think about relationship building as a way to provide value, you and I are in a we had a conversation with the three of us, and I say three of us, with your partner. And then we started talking about, oh, well, what do you need? And I need ABC, right? And you were so generous in offering that first. And then I said, well, what do you need? And you shared with me, we need ABC. And so we immediately started getting in touch with each other and following up on those things. That's giving. You build relationships on providing value, right? And, someone may say, oh, wow, I really like that book. And then the next day you think about, oh, I saw that book. I can either send it, or I can, give the person more information, whatever the case is. So authenticity is relevant no matter whether you're building strategic relationships or not. You're just building relationships. There's a saying I like that's called, your net worth is in your network, right?
Yes.
And what that means is, the more value you provide, the more valuable your network is. And then when you do need something and you ask for it, underline, ask for it.
Yes.
Right? Because many of us are afraid to ask for it, or resistant to asking for it, which we shouldn't, which I'll come back to later. Right. But you probably have people that or people that they know that could provide you guidance, insight, lead you in the right direction, whatever the case is. So that's the authenticity piece. So the strategic piece. So if you're as a professional or in a career perspective, the strategic piece is really, again, and sometimes it bothers us as women because we're not transactional, right? We're not, generally speaking, we're not transactional people. And so the strategic piece is, And I do this all the time. I run businesses there. I have multiple things that are going on. So
Mhm.
I will purposely, to the best of my ability on any given day, I will focus on building relationships. And part of that is putting yourself in a place where you're meeting the people that you want to meet. By the way, I
Right.
did this with dating too when I got divorced. Okay. It applies everything. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Just as a quick aside, I got divorced. I was going to think about, the type of individual I'd like to meet. And I thought, well, golf. If I learn how to play golf, that puts me in a place where there are a lot of interesting men.
Yes. Right.
Right. There's another reason too to play golf, but that's how I'm
Strategy.
thinking.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
strategically putting myself in a place where has a group,
Yes.
right? A group of people that you want to meet. So it is about giving value, but it's also about putting yourself in the places where you will have a higher likelihood of meeting
Mhm.
people. And that Keith Ferrazzi's book, I think, is fantastic,
Yes.
related to that. And he's tenacious in an authentic way. And
Mhm.
so that's what I very much like about that book.
I love that. And I think you're right in terms of being, part of the strategy is thinking about, well, who do you need to know or who do you need to get proximate to? And just like your dating analogy is, it's like, well, I could be proximate to a lot of interesting people if I took up golf. And so
Mhm.
same thing of thinking about, where do I, and it may not be I'm targeting one person, but it's like, hey, I should actually get out there and maybe go to these networking events or go somewhere to where the people that are like-minded or who I need to get to know are there. So I think it's powerful. I mean, the strategy may not even be in the relationship itself. It just may be that you're putting yourself in the right place. I think
Yes.
that's phenomenal.
And Monica, I
Yes.
just want to circle back because the whole networking event sometimes causes people anxiety. What
Yes.
do I
Mhm.
say? How do I start a conversation? And again, if you're an introvert, and I parent one, so
Yes.
I have some knowledge that that can also be anxiety provoking. And it's we hear networking events. And by the way, today in can I say this post COVID? I guess I can't. I'm not sure,
Yes.
but on the other side of when we're all locked down, I'm not sure that networking events are really the
The
key.
place.
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
opportunity. I see you can meet someone in the elevator, right?
Yes,
You can meet someone at the grocery store as you're looking at the salad dressings, right? And you're
exactly.
talking to
Uh-huh.
someone next door. You're standing in line waiting to pay or whatever the case
Yeah,
is.
we met. We were just kind of waiting for our appetizers, and you happened to be standing there. We're like, "Would you like some?" And we
Right.
started talking.
Exactly. That's
Uh-huh.
exactly right. Right.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I've certainly met people in airports and on a plane, different things. So I would say this is less about a networking event. There are obviously events where you can meet
Yes.
people and things like that, but it's more about how do you really engage with people? And again, that's one of the reasons why I like Keith's book a lot. So.
That's phenomenal. Now, you also touched a little earlier of your holy time of like
Mhm.
making sure that you are giving yourself space to reflect and to meditate and to
Mhm.
visualize. Can you talk a little bit about that and the power of, what are some of the daily habits and rituals that are key to your career success that sometimes people think, it contradicts what they think, like if I take an hour or 30 minutes to meditate or to think in the middle of the day, I'm wasting time. Can you talk a
Mm.
little bit about that?
Yes. So I started my holy hour practice in earnest actually as a way to deal with the grief of losing my son. So now,
Hmm.
just over 20 years. And it started with me carving out a space and a time of the day to cry and work through that grief. And then I could function right for
Hmm.
the next 8 to 10 hours. And I'd go to sleep. And then if I did that again in the morning, then I could function. It was really a way of functioning. And
Right.
just to kind of give you a perspective, in the midst of that grief, um, my therapist suggested try to focus on what you're thankful for, because when you're in the depths of despair of that kind of grief, it's really
Hmm.
hard.
Yes.
And so I remember my initial like, okay, I took the advice down and I started to write down, and I literally on my list was like 3 or 4 things. That's all I could see at that moment in time. My,
Hmm.
my son who died was my middle son. So I still had my oldest son at the time.
Hmm.
So my oldest child, of course, I was married then. So, the support of my husband, although he was grieving as well, the sunshine. And
Mhm.
one time I was sitting outside, I was sitting on a bench that we had in our garden, and I was noticing the sun for the first time in a couple of months. And looking back into the kitchen and seeing the pantry and remembering that my Jiffy's peanut butter was in there, and I love peanut butter. And so I'm like, okay, I'll add that to the list. I'm thankful for my peanut butter.
Yes.
But the point being that my list was like this big, because that's all the capacity I had at that moment in time.
Right.
Today, now, of course, my list is so long that I
Mhm.
actually have to divide up my list. I have this methodology on even days, I focus on this part of my list. On odd days, I focus on this part of my list. But the
Uh-huh.
point being is that so the holy hour started with reserving time so that I could process what I needed to process, that I had some level of equilibrium for the
Mm.
rest of the day. And
Mhm.
that's still true today. So the holy hour serves that purpose. And I have a full throttle life and a gazillion things going on,
Mhm.
and much of it's stressful, at the because I'm growing businesses, I'm raising capital, those kinds of things.
Yes.
And so it does provide a way to make sure that I'm in a state of equilibrium as opposed
Mhm.
to disequilibrium. That's that piece. The second piece is I have to say that gratefulness advice I got then
Mhm.
was really powerful, and it's really powerful even today.
Mhm.
Uh, and again, that goes back to tying it to the fearlessness, having courage, because I look at all
Yes.
the things I'm grateful for and go, okay, worst case scenario. Oh boy, I have all these things. I'm still great. Like nothing's going to happen to all these
Mhm.
things or people I'm grateful for, even if the
Yes.
worst thing were to happen, right? And then the other piece of that is I do try to read something that's uplifting or nourishing for my brain, my soul, my well-being, whatever the case is.
Mhm.
And I will say to you, back to your question, if I carve out the time, I feel I'm wasting time. In my case, I can't afford not to do it.
Mm. Yes.
I
That's
can't
powerful.
afford not to do it, because if I go too many days, and it often happens when I'm traveling, or I've got too many early meetings, which then
Yeah.
compresses and I don't get that time in, I notice in how I'm managing things. Uh,
Mm.
and so, I would just say I can't afford not to do it. That's
Mm.
how I
I
look
love
at
that. And
it.
that's powerful. That's such an amazing example. Um, I want to touch back in a little bit, not too much around clarity, but it's more about passion and how did you connect passion to what you do? And you shared that there was this theme of, even when you were a broadcaster, there was, you wanted to have impact. You noticed a gap. But I've noticed also in all of your companies, there is also that same thread, that passion that you have of having impact around, you first created saberhacer.com, and then there's BiasSync that's really focusing on, disrupting the unconscious bias for organizations. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think sometimes individuals have a really hard time answering that question when we say, what are you passionate about? And they immediately start thinking, oh, gardening, this or that. And then they don't know how to tie it into the day job. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to pull some of those things in that you were passionate about, and really put that, like, help motivate you in the things that you do today?
Yes, thank you. So, passion is what keeps you going on the toughest days. It really
Mm-hmm.
does, if you think about it,
Yes.
right? So if your time is focused on things or something that doesn't bring you passion, think of, the hardest day that you've had
Mm-hmm.
recently. And I don't mean traumatic day, but I mean, generally speaking, we all can think back the hardest day in the last 2 weeks or a month or whatever the
Right.
case is, right? When you have passion, you still get up and you still continue. And some days it feels like you're slogging through, right?
Yes.
But you
Yes.
still continue. That's passion. When you don't have passion, you have trouble getting through your toughest days. And I
Yes.
do think, I certainly know plenty of individuals I'll give you an example, have entered professions
Mm-hmm.
because looking back, they felt pressure that they needed to
Mm-hmm.
enter into a certain profession, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many of us who are children of immigrants can relate to that, because
Yes.
our parents, envision not so much today, I don't know, but certainly when I was young in high school and college age, the concept then was you need to be a doctor, you need to be
Yes,
a
doctor, lawyer.
lawyer.
Yeah,
And
yes.
that's it, doctor, or lawyer. Like there
Mhm.
was no capacity to see that there might be other things that might be right. And you knew, and so here I thought, marching along, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. Never
Mhm.
mind the fact that I also tried to donate blood several times and fainted every single time I saw blood. And that got to the point where they said, thank you, but no, thank you. You're too much of a headache. Don't
Uh-huh.
come back. Right. Clue, clue, clue. I guess I shouldn't be a doctor.
Right, right.
Right. But but I've talked to plenty of people and you ask them, especially and in our age, and I'm going to make an assumption. I
Mhm.
don't know if you're there. I know you're
Absolutely.
there, but I would say that if you look back at why we chose a profession, there's probably a fair amount of people who would say, I felt pressured. I felt I would let someone down.
Mhm.
And coincidentally, they've entered that profession. Maybe they're still in it many years later, but it's not passion, right? It's not their
Mhm.
passion. And so I think that going back to that question, what keeps you going on the hardest days, if what you're doing doesn't bring you passion, then from my perspective, it's hard to be joyful.
Right.
And
Mhm.
it's hard to be joyful when you're not doing something that you're passionate about. So therefore, maybe you want to consider something else and have the courage to make
Mhm.
the transition. Now, I'm not an expert, and I certainly don't profess to be able to have a formula that's,
Mhm.
foolproof and, will absolutely work. And obviously everyone has to take certain things into consideration about their finances and, et cetera, and those kinds of things and responsibilities towards family. But to the extent that you can, and usually it's easier than you might initially be thinking, because what holds us back? Fear,
Yes.
right?
Fear. Mhm.
Fear. And back again to one of the lessons or how it shaped my life. In losing my son, I became very focused on joyfulness.
Mm.
And I don't care, life is too short. The older we get, the more we realize how fast time is going by.
Yes.
And if you are living life and you're not experiencing joy, right, then what's the point?
Yes.
Right? What's the
Mhm.
point? As far as
Yeah.
I am concerned. And
Mhm.
so I do recommend, in terms of passions aligned with joyfulness. And I'm a big proponent of using that kind of test as a barometer on your toughest day.
Mm. I love that. And you're right. What's the point of, if you can't find joy, there's no point. And what's the point if you can't feel, a sense of accomplishment in what you're doing if you're not feeling joy? So it kind of, there's this domino effect of like, you can be successful, but if you aren't, if you don't feel joy out of that success, then, it's difficult to keep going on the hardest days. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it's powerful, and asking yourself why. And like you said, then finding the courage to figure out, how do I bring joy into what I'm doing? So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for
Yes,
sharing that.
of
Yes,
course.
absolutely. Well, I could talk forever, but I know we have to kind of close up. So I'm going to move to the lightning round questions we love to ask. And, I feel like sometimes these are the more telling answers that are just fun and we get to know another side of you. But you already shared your book on the networking book, or the Don't Ever, have lunch again. Remind me the name of the author, so I write
Oh,
that
Keith
down.
Ferrazzi.
Keith Razi.
Yeah. Is
So
this a question about favorite book?
yeah. So what is your what book greatly influenced? So we know that one did, but I'm sure there's another.
Yes. The Go-Giver.
The Go-Giver.
The Go-Giver
Mm,
by Bob Berg. It's about this
mm,
big. It's about this big. It's a
the
pardon me,
Go-Giver.
a parable.
Parable.
And it is a fantastic book. And I actually give that away a lot as gifts. And I have
Mm,
people call me and say, oh my gosh, where's this book been? I love it. So The Go-Giver.
the Go-Giver. I'm gonna have to look that
Mhm.
up. Some Christmas gifts. Christmas right around
There,
the corner.
oh, trust me. Talk about building
Absolutely.
relationships. Give it to everyone you know.
Awesome. Good one. I'm gonna write that down. What is your favorite inspiring quote or saying?
Mm. Yes. So when you were born, I'm going to probably get this a bit wrong, But the concept is, when you were born, the people around you were laughing and you were crying, right? Babies crying.
Mhm. Yeah.
Live your life so that when you die, you're the one who's laughing and people around you are crying.
I love that.
Yeah, and I may have kind of a word slightly off there,
Mhm.
but that's it. It's a Moody,
Mhm.
Moody quote.
A Moody
Yes,
quote. I
but you
love
get the
that.
point of it.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. So what is one word or moniker you would use to describe yourself?
Tenacious.
Tenacious. I love it. I can see it totally too. What is one change, habit, behavior, or action that you implemented that made your life better?
More sleep.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes,
Yeah,
more sleep.
more sleep. I used
Mm,
to be able to operate on, 5, 6 hours. That's not, I'm not at my best.
mhm,
And so I've re-architected my life so that I can get, you know, assuming I, don't wake up and stuff, a good full night, 8 hours of sleep.
okay, good one.
James LeBron, by the way, has a great podcast, a
Mhm.
meditation type podcast on the importance of sleep and his habits around sleep. It's really
Yes, I
great.
started
He
listening
takes it to
to,
the nth level.
yeah, in the Calm
He
app. I've been listening to
Calm,
some of his.
exactly. The
Yes,
Calm app. Yeah.
yes.
LeBron James. Yes.
And he has the tenor of his voice. You just kind of like zone out.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
buying it. Yes, LeBron, I'm
yes,
buying it.
yeah. I'm loving it. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite. So what power song would you want playing as you walked out onto the stage?
Oh my gosh. So I'm pop illiterate, just so you know. I
Uh-huh.
can hear melodies, but I don't always remember names. Someone who supports me for many years is here in the room with me. Essie, what's the song? The Lion song. Oh,
I love it.
yeah. Oh my God, I can't even be. I can't remember it at the moment, but was this in my cheat sheet notes? Like to remind
Yes,
me of what it is. I can hear it, but it'll come back to me hopefully in the next 60.
absolutely. You can
Okay.
share it. You can share it. And we have it. What we love to do is a tradition of taking all of our guest podcast songs and we make them into a compilation and have like a
Oh,
power hit list. So
this is actually a really important question.
no, yeah. And we'll get it from you,
Okay.
but we can
Okay.
hear it. And we heard part
Gotcha.
of the melody. So I'm sure we'll have
Yes.
our
Yes.
audience will probably start like commenting in like that. I know the song.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Michele, it's been such a pleasure to have you on, and everything that you shared is so spot on. And I think, what I took away from it is that, you lead by example, and a lot of the things that you talk, you are, doing them. And you really honestly reinforced a lot of what we, share and teach around, these ideas to help women get ahead. And seeing and hearing a story like yours, I think is just so inspiring and kind of paves the way for others to say, okay, I can do it too. So thank you so much for sharing that and for
Thank you, Monica. Thank
sharing all
you.
of those things and for being vulnerable and sharing how, sometimes our obstacles become our opportunities. And so thank you for
For
that.
sure. Thank you.